questions can be expected? So, good evening, students, and welcome to our second session in a few days. Today's session will be on TCS Digital, and we'll be looking at what could possibly be asked in round two of your interviews. Now, before we begin with this, let me just introduce myself. This is Shashank here, your trainer for today, and let us begin this without any delay. So, many of you may have already cleared TCS round one, the previous round of interviews, which was online. You had a couple of advanced coding rounds and so on. And from here, we will now look at, once you have cleared it, in the next round, what could possibly be asked and how exactly this interview will occur, and what do we need to know and what do we need to learn in order to work through this. Now, the first thing that I would suggest when it comes to TCS Digital round 2 to all the students is that it's a verbal interview. You will be communicating verbally with the interviewer, who will be specifying regarding certain things, and it will be an interview where there's going to be a combination of technical skills, communicative skills, and your ability to hold yourself up. So let us look at what are possibly asked in this when it comes down to it. So the first couple of questions that you can possibly expect in this is the very basics, that is about yourself, and then about your projects or internship, as well as your favorite subjects or favorite programming languages as well. These are some things that you can expect as the first few questions going ahead. So, moving along with these questions, the other things you can possibly expect when it comes down to this is that there will be questions particularly on technical concepts. Let's say, for instance, you are asked all these questions to begin with, then comes up the possible technical questions, particularly that they have asked in the previous times, are from object oriented programming. This is one thing from where common questions are often asked, followed by this. The other questions you can possibly expect are from DBMS, networks, and recent trends, which is a very common topic. That is things like artificial intelligence, machine learning, deep learning, blockchain, big data analytics, internet of things, and so on. So you can expect certain questions even from recent trends like this. In our session for today, we will be looking at the first few questions that you can expect to be asked for yourself. Followed by this, we will also look at the other kinds of questions you can possibly expect from OOPS that you can easily answer. Now, most of the times, what happens is the questions that they may ask, especially when it comes down to OOPS, may sound simple, but the answers they expect are definitely not the ones that we may be explaining. So there are some certain things that we need to look at. There are certain things that we need to understand when we think of answering the questions that they will ask in terms of OOPS. I will be explaining what sort of common questions you guys will be getting in it, and how to answer them because sometimes when we talk about these things, questions may sound simple, but the answers to all of them are not necessarily simple. So let us go ahead from this and look at the first few things. So before we start with object oriented programming, the first thing you'll be asked is about yourself, about your project or internship, your favorite subjects or programming languages. Now within this, when you talk about yourself, spend a few seconds and just explain to them what exactly they would need to know in order to hire you. That is all you need to explain. That is name, college, what degree you're doing, and what are the achievements done by you. You can start with your CGPA or SGPA, whatever it could be, followed by this your grade point average, followed by grade point average. You will start to go through mainly your achievements, that is, let's say papers published or courses done or internship or project or other things, like let's say for instance you may have also completed a few courses online to learn something, or you may have learned new programming languages which without doing any course, even that. And what are your strengths when it comes down to technical abilities, coding? What are your weaknesses? And whenever you're speaking about weaknesses, you have to also talk about how you're overcoming them. It's There's no point in just talking about a weakness if you don't say that I'm overcoming this. If I say that I'm from EC background and my strengths are that I'm able to learn programming quickly and I started recently, I can immediately say that my weakness is that I'm not good at certain programming languages. But since I'm able to learn them quickly, since the last few months, I'm able to go through C, C++, Java, Python, or whatever it could be, and trying to learn as much as possible. This is one way you can possibly expect to explain about it as well. Now, followed by this, when they talk about your project, here's the thing: you need to know what exactly your project is about, that is abstract, what your role was in developing the project. So when you talk about your role in the project, that is basically, if it's a team project, what did you do particularly? And it should not be just like I did the report. You have to make sure that you're explaining in such a way that you're technologically contributing within the project as well. You have to make sure that you explain about whatever technology you guys are using, and what project you're doing, how you're making it work, and so on. So one good thing to know is to learn about what technology is used within this project. This is something that you need to know very clearly. And if you're using some certain technologies, let's say for instance you're working on web programming, and you're using a technology, let's say JavaScript, then you need to know what exactly is JavaScript, how you're using it within this, how you're working through it. And they may ask you some questions on JavaScript itself. If it is based on machine learning, you need to know as much as possible about machine learning with respect to your project, so you can answer any questions if asked within it. So followed by that, the next thing is about your internship. So based on your internship, you'll basically be asked again your role, what project did you work on, what skills did you learn, and so on. These are a few questions you may expect. So, what were you a part of team? A team? How are you handling things within your own team, and so on. So, also to all the students who have joined in, you guys have any questions, particularly like if a certain question like this is asked, when it comes to basic details like this, how do I answer it? What do I answer? If you have any such confusions within this, you can ask in the chat and we will make sure to respond. Now, I do have one question when will TCS Digital results be published? It's purely up to them. Generally, they do try to publish it as soon as they can in order to in order to take up through the next interview, then train you guys, then put you guys in a live project. So it can't be guaranteed like with a countdown. So we just have to wait. That's the only option. So going ahead, the next thing is your favorite subjects or favorite programming languages. Within this, the possible questions you can expect is, first you'll be asked what is your favorite subject or favorite programming language. When you explain that something is particularly your favorite subject or programming language, you will be asked questions on it. So if you're stating my favorite subject is DBMS, then you should be knowing well about DBMS, because you will be asked questions on it without a doubt. So going ahead from this, knowing that these are the very basic questions that you can expect, followed by this, everything that you can expect ahead will be on the digital front of it, that is technical front of it. And most often they do focus on oops DBMS networks and recent trends, which is a huge focus. Whether you're from CS or non-CS background, recent trends is a very common concept you guys will be given questions on. So I have a few questions already. Uh, Let me try to go through these questions, and then we will start with all the technical aspects that we should focus on, so that we can be good at answering for this TCS Digital Round 2 interview. So one of the questions I have received is, how do we prepare for this if you are from a non-CS branch, and what is the possibility to crack it? See, here's the thing. Since one of the first questions is that one of you are from a non-CS branch, what I would suggest is not to worry. See, they are hiring people from every branch for a reason. They are hiring people for their logical abilities, technical and logical abilities. So, what I would suggest is, if you're good at something, learn well about it and express it. If you're good at oops, if you're good at this DBMS or whatever it could be, explain that you're from a non-CS branch and you have started learning programming recently, and these are the things you have already learned well. Particularly, let's say CS and sorry, C and C++ and Java or something like that, and other things like Python and machine learning. You're starting to learn it now, but you're not good at it. It's something you're starting to learn now, is something you can state. So this is what I would suggest. I think this would be the best way. And one more thing I would suggest is, go through our entire course that we will be providing free of cost in this YouTube live series session. It will help you out a lot too, because we will be focusing on most commonly asked questions in all four of these domains. Recent trends is again huge set of domains, but in all these domains, whatever are the common questions asked, we will be focusing on them. So one more question, how to answer if you are not able to write the asked program? See, when it's about asked program, first thing, make sure you guys try to understand the logic for the program. If you guys can understand the logic at least, even if you're unable to solve it, you can at least explain that this is the logic that I would need to solve it in. I would probably need a little more assistance with um, something, or a little more help over through some materials online or something like that. um, then I can work through it, because I'm um, learning all of these when it comes down to programming a little new. Is something Vinay can answer, because you guys have stated that if you're not able to write an ask program, if you're just silent over there, there's no point in it. You have to answer, and when you're answering, if you answer wrong, that's also not fair, not right. So you can't be like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna make sure that the question whatever is asked, I'll answer it, and whether it's correct or not, I'm just gonna answer it. You can't go through that step. On the other hand, you can't be like, I'm not gonna answer this question because I don't know the answer. So you have to find a balance between them. That is, if you are unable to write an asked program in code, at least tell them, I may not be able to write it fully in code, but I know the logic. I'm able to understand the logic, how to solve it instantly. That logic, I can at least put it in an algorithm right away, and then I can try converting it into a code. At least you can say that to save a little bit of your technical knowledge. If you don't know how to solve it, this would at least be better than not answering. I have one more question. What questions will be asked for TCS digital interview? Will it be same for everyone or more technical oriented? It depends on the interviewer a little, and it also depends on how you talk about yourself, how you talk about the things you have done and everything. Basically, it is an interview where they test your technical skills as well. They test your ability in terms of technical skills, talking verbally, how quick you are able to answer, how confidently you are able to answer. It's a combination of technical and verbal skills both. So there are technical questions asked, but in a verbal way. So that's the basic idea. So one more question. Is there a chance 2019 batch will get to sit in digital? Please do check the complete. I think they have stated the minimum requirements as well. So I have one more question, that is, what should I answer to the question, why did you choose ECE if you wanted to switch to an IT career? So here's the thing, it's not just ECE. There may be a lot of other branch students like mechanical or electrical and so on. So there could be a possible question like, why do you want to switch to IT? You can just state that I thought electronics or mechanical, whatever it is, was the right engineering for me, or my rankings were low, that's why I got it. Whatever it is, the reason that you got into it, whatever it could be. And recently, over time, over the last year or so, I've started to realize that I do have a passion towards coding, or I do have a passion towards programming. And you can state that is the reason why I am switching off to IT particularly, because I feel I like this, I'm passionate about this, I want to do this. And although I realized it a little late in my engineering, I hope I haven't realized it much later than to be realized. You can state at least something like this is what I would suggest. I have one more question. Why do you have less marks in 12th? How can I answer this? It's simple. Whatever could be the reason, go ahead and say it. You weren't focusing, you weren't like healthy, whatever it could be the reason, just go ahead and state it, whatever it could be. Just make sure that if that reason makes the interviewer feel like you may be lazy or you or something like that, you have to rectify it by saying that after 12th I've tried to recover in my engineering, and this is how much I've scored, and this is how I've learned, and this is how I've started to improve myself. That is something you have to say. If you feel like whatever you're saying when it comes down to 12th doesn't make you look like you're giving your best. So I have a couple of other questions. I'll just try to answer them quickly before we go on to oops. So I have one more thing question, that is, if you've made anything, be really passionate about it, go on speaking about it. Yes, you can definitely do that. So I have just a couple of questions. What questions will they ask for a mechanical engineering students? Basic, same thing. When it comes to mechanical engineering or computer science, whoever it is, they will ask for your favorite subjects, favorite programming languages. They will look at your resume. They will look at your internship project, whatever it is. Followed by this, they will ask common questions on these: object-oriented programming, recent trends, and DBMS and networks. That's something we need to know. So one more thing, how to answer if they ask why have you not done any certification courses. See, if you have recently uh, gone into IT, if you haven't worked through um, coding part before at all over the years, you were from a different branch, then yes, you can state that I haven't gone through any certification courses particularly in this because I didn't have a thought of this, but now I'm starting to learn programming languages. And if you're taking up any certification courses right now, you can even state that. That will also help. And if you're stating that, remember, you can expect questions even in that. So make sure you know that. So I have a couple of more questions. I want to take this up as quickly as possible because I want to start with oops as early as possible. So one is, what should I answer? One application that's your favorite. What don't you like about it? What changes will you bring if you were a chief editor? So this question, yes, that's a common question as well. What they're basically asking is, we generally use our mobile phones. What is one application that you often use that's your favorite? What do you not like about it? What changes would you make? So just look at your phone, look at the apps that you generally use. It could be a game, it could be an app, whatever it could be. Think about what could improve it and just explain that in a technical way. Just think, for instance, the moment you use, let's say, your phone, let's say you have a smart house, you want to connect to a Wi-Fi LED thing, or let's say you have any app, whatever it is. So whatever you think it could technically get better at, you can specify that. You guys may have had issues with Ola, there is a cab is booked but it's not showing or something like that, and you can think like, okay, this can be solved in a certain way. You can explain that. That is one thing. So I have one more question. I have basic knowledge on C and Python. What language is better to say I'm confident? It depends on what you're confident on. That's purely your abilities. So one of you have not done any academic projects because you're from a MCA background. Will that affect me? As long as you're able to technically please and answer to them, no, not at all, no issues, because they're hiring you even though you're from MCA, BCA and everything, which where you may not have completed a project at all. But if you're working on anything, if you're doing anything, explain about it. You can state it, not a problem. And one more thing, being from a non-CS background, you have not done CS related project or internship. In that case, if there's nothing related to CS, basically the questions you will expect are going to be on these itself. These are something you need to know. See, just by not being from CS background doesn't mean you get a pass through, like you won't be asked any CS questions. You will be. So it's something we basically need to know. So please note, to everyone, make sure you guys go through and know that. So let us go on, and let us look at what are the possible questions we can expect within this. When it comes down to oops, let us basically start with the very common things that we can expect in this. So the first thing I would suggest, guys, is when it comes down to this, you're going to expect a question initially, that is, so if you say I know C++ or something like that, and Java or something like that, one of the first questions you will expect is, what is the difference between C and C++? Now here's where I'll tell you guys, most of the answers most of the people state are basically the same. That is, C is procedure oriented, C++ is object oriented. This is the basic answer most people just state. But if you start thinking about it in detail, what could I say that could make a difference? Because you basically have to make a difference. You basically have to state in such a way that whatever you're saying as an answer is not the very common basic thing that everyone else says. So here's the idea. The first thing is, of course, C is procedure oriented. That is absolutely correct. C++ is object oriented. But here's the thing, most of us already know that C++ is an advanced version of C, and C is taken up and improved in a lot of ways by adding more features to create C++. That is, first up, you guys know there are things like, no, I have one question, that is, do we need to know the year invented? Not necessarily. Uh, of course, you can, if you do know it, you can go ahead and answer it. But year invented does not make an impact to the interviewer on a technical aspect. When you talk about technical aspect, what I'm talking about is only the thing that interviewer cares about, interviewer wants to know. So we know C++ is an advanced version of C, and you can basically state within this that in C++, since it's an advanced version of C, since it's an improved version from C, the number of keywords are changed. More keywords are added, more features are added in C++. Then you can start explaining what are those features that are added. So the first thing, as all of you know, C++ is added with a few features. One, that is object oriented, by which you have basically the three concepts, that is abstraction, polymorphism, and inheritance. And in polymorphism, you guys know, you can also state there is function overloading, function overriding, and everything. Since it's an advanced version, many people don't realize this. The number of keywords in C++ is different from C. C has 32 keywords when you talk about C, whereas C++ number of keywords is 52. Now I'm talking about C in terms of C99 version. So one often question can be asked is, when you say C has 32 keywords and C++ has 52 keywords, if they ask, are you sure C has only 32 keywords? It's not entirely true, because C also has more than 32 keywords. But the more than 32 keywords come up when you go through different versions of C. C released in 1999 has 32 keywords. If you guys are interested in knowing this, learning this, you guys can check out how much keywords C has that was released in the year 2011 and 2017. There were multiple versions. If you know about it, that's always a good thing. Whereas C++ has 52 keywords. So followed by this, the other thing that is available, you can explain about features that C++ provides. Things like exception handling, reference variables, a mutable variable. All of these are certain features that C++ provides, which C doesn't have. And there may be also a question stating, why is C++ more secure than C? It's because you can hide and restrict the scope of certain variables through classes and objects. So with this reason, they state that C++ is slightly more secure, to make sure that something should not be accessed outside anywhere and so on. So that is one thing that I would suggest, that you guys can say when it comes down to this. I have one more question. If I update my resume, will they consider my updated resume? Highly doubtful at this point of time. But you can always explain whatever new you have done during the interview. That's never a problem. Then I have one more question. What should I answer if I've not done any projects? See, if you haven't done any projects, you have to be explaining the reason for it. That is, what is the reason that you weren't working on any projects? If you currently are starting it, you can at least state that. So whatever could be the reason, it should be valid enough that they accept it. If you say, I don't know, I haven't done any projects, it should not mean that you don't know programming as well. Both are different. I can say in an interview that I haven't done any project, but I know C++ and Java well. Or I can say in my interview that I am not from computer science, so I naturally have not done a project in computer science, but I also don't know C and C++ and Java. I'm not so good at it. I'm just very basic at it. If you say that, not just because project is not done, because your skills in programming languages are not enough, that takes a hit, especially when you're asked questions. So if you haven't done a project, not a problem, just be good at the skills when it comes down to this. So let's go to a few other questions that you can expect within these. Now, I just want to know from you guys. There are many of you guys in the live chat already. I want a response from you guys as to how good you guys are in C++. Do you guys know things like reference variables or static variables or things like mutable, all these things when it comes down to C++? Are you guys good at all of these that you can easily answer in interviews, or do you guys think it is something that you guys feel like if questions are asked on this, particularly interview questions, I don't know how to answer them? So in that case, we can go through them in more detail. So think about that, students. So by the time I will go for a few basic questions that are often asked when it comes down to this. So one of the common questions is, when it comes to C, in how many ways can you pass data from one function to another function? So when it comes to C, you can only pass data from one function to another function in two ways. As we know, it's something like call by value, and it's something like call by address. And to all the students who are joined in just now, we are going through TCS Digital round 2 coding, verbal interview round, where we are looking at what sort of questions can be asked and how to solve them. And I have got a few answers already that certain C++ questions you guys are not way too sure about. So we will go through a little bit in depth within it, and I'll explain as much as possible about it. But before going through that, guys, please note this: there are certain basic questions that you will be asked. So things like these. In C, how many ways can you pass data from one function to another function? We know this. We basically have two ways. I'll just show them in short for those who want to know this. Let's take this for instance. You have a main function. Because there are students from different branches, I just want to make sure you guys know these well. Let's say you have int a equals 10 and int, let's say, b equals 20, and let's take something like swap of a comma b, and let's just print the results, that is %t/t %t/n, and the results we are printing out are a and b respectively. And we are taking another function here called void swap, and all that we are doing here is just taking int a, int b that we are sending over there, we are receiving here and just printing, oh sorry, not printing, we're just swapping them. We are storing a to temp, then b to a, and then temp to b. Now you guys know that the values will not change here. We know this already, because this is in a different scope, this is in a different scope. That is basically your call by value in C. Call by address in C is where you're sending address of a and b, and you're receiving it in your function as pointers. And if you change it here, the values of a and b do get changed final result in the final result. So that is basically your call by address. So this is something we know about. Now in C++, there are not just two ways to send and receive data. There are not just two ways to send. I have one question: why %d? Because they are integers, I'm just using %d to print them. That stands for your decimal value basically. So we are printing it as integer decimal value. If you don't want to print it as %d, you can print it as %i also. The result is the same. You can try that if you like. So Just to try this out, I'll just take this as, let's say, a program.c and just show you guys the output for the same for your reference as well. So here, let me not send the address, let me just send the value just for you guys to take a reference. So if I just compile it and run it, say, for instance here, the output you get is basically 10 and 20. Instead, if you do call by address, of course we know that the values get changed and the output is, instead of 10 and 20, we get it as 20 and 10. So sorry guys, hold on. So we know that the basic output is 20 and 10. So these are the two ways to pass data in C. But when it comes to C++, there are three ways to pass data, not just two. And the other thing everyone should know is, in C language, don't ever say the two ways to pass data is call by value and the other one as call by reference. Do not ever say that. That shows that you don't know much of a difference between C and C++, because in C++ you have a separate thing called call by reference. So call by reference is not there in C at all. So it's always a good choice not to bring up the word reference when it comes to C, and only use it as the keyword address or call by, in other words, pointers. Now, when it comes to C++, on the other hand, you have call by value, which we have already seen. You have call by address or pointer. And finally, you have something else called call by reference. Now, this is where a few questions you can expect within this. That is, they may ask, okay, you tell me, what do you know that is the difference between C and C++? So when you start explaining about the differences between C and C++ particularly, here's the thing. The difference between C and C++, when you explain that C++ has something called reference variables and so on, they'll ask you, oh, so what are reference variables? What do they do? So it's just basically, think of something similar to pointer, but you're not exactly stating that it's a pointer. So in short, think about this. I'm not gonna send address of A and B, I'll only send A and B. But here, I will receive it as int ampersand A, int ampersand B. If you did this in C language, you're gonna get an error, we know that. But in C++, this is valid. So basically what happens here is, in C++, when you compile this program, again, I don't have to do ccprogram.c. This is C file. I need to save it as, let's say, C++. Because if I compile this, where I'm receiving it as ampersand A and ampersand B, in C, I'm going to get an error. Please note this, students. Only in C++ you can do this, which is called a reference. So let me save this as program.cpp instead. Let's compile this. So once I compile the C++ file, of course, C++, as we know, always states int main should be the default main return type, should be int. So I'll just make it int main and I'll return some number, let's say 0. So let's compile again, and now let's execute it. Now it's gonna be 2010. So this is because something called reference variable. And here's basically how it works. Say you have something like int a equals 10, and you have something like, let's say, int b equals address of a. We know that b is a pointer which is storing address of a. We are clear about this. So b will store address of a, let's say it is 1000, and a is having a value 10 which is stored in address, let's say 1000. Now on the other hand, Instead of doing this, if I do something like int ampersand b equals a, that means this is a reference variable, and reference variables store or always point to other variables. They do not point to constants. Reference variables, if they're pointing to constants, it's basically error. This is first thing we need to know. So again, this is just a small thing that we need to know, but when a reference variable points to another variable like a, here's basically what happens. B, first up you have a, let me just write this. You have a which is storing 10, and you have another variable b which is referring to a. That means b is a variable which points to same address as a. So if I change b, a gets changed. If I change a, b gets changed. Both are pointing to same address. That is the basic idea of a reference variable. So once we are clear with this basic idea of a reference variable, we can then look at what could be asked in this interview questions. So the basic idea over here is, in our case, think about this. In C++, you have three ways to send data to a function, whereas in C, you have only two ways. So in how many ways can you pass data from one function to another function in C? Two ways: call by value, call by address. In C++, call by value, call by address or pointer, and then comes call by reference, whereas reference variables are not available in C. So this is again just a very minor and basic question, and that we need to know, and understand in terms of difference between C and C++. Also, to many of you who may not know this, C++ has different data types compared to C as well. Like C++ data types include a few other things, include a couple of extra things apart from what just C has. So in C, we know we already have char, int, float, double, and everything. When it comes to C++, you have something called wchar underscore t, which stands for wide character. So that takes up 2 bytes. That's a separate data type you have. And apart from this, you also have something called boolean as well. So these are some things that you just need to know. And followed by this, let's look at what other basic questions can we expect in TCS Digital. Again, students, please note, I'm not going to focus on much of basics of C++, all of the things that we need to know if we want to learn C++ fully here. The only thing we are focusing on, the only thing we are concentrating on here is what sort of questions can be asked in TCS Digital round 2, and how do we basically answer them. So followed by this, another common thing that is asked is about something called storage classes. So guys, there's something called storage classes in C and C++. So if any of you are new to this word called storage classes, it's just a way to define visibility, behavior of a variable. So you are able to define, or you are able to get to know how long a variable is visible, and how it behaves, where it is stored, and what is its lifetime. All these things are basically stated using something called storage classes. Now in C language, there are 4 storage classes. Those 4 storage classes are auto, register, static, and extern. And a common interview question in TCS Digital also could be based on static keyword as well. So let's not focus on this in detail for now. Let's just remember this much. So in C, you have four storage classes, and basically every variable belongs to one of these storage classes. It could be auto, which means it is stored in RAM. We also call it as automatic. Register means it is stored in CPU registers. Static means it has a completely different meaning, which I'll go for further on. And finally, the last thing is extern. So one of the most common thing you can expect within this is only on static variable. But in C++, you have 5 storage classes, not just 4. The 5 storage classes you have here are auto and register and static and extern, same as in C. But you have one more thing called mutable. Mutable means it can be changed even if some things are constant. There are some restrictions, like some things must be constant. You can even change that if it is mutable. So this is the very basic idea when it comes down to this. So going ahead with this, let us now look at the next few questions that you can possibly expect. Again, within these sort of topics. So I just want to point out a question to all of you. When it comes down to C and C++, in these, the moment we start, apart from the very basic difference which we have completed, the questions come up are from object-oriented programming itself. So one of the first thing that will be asked is, what is object-oriented programming? What do you know about it? And what are the concepts included within it? So this is one of the common questions that you can expect within. So our first answer generally in this will be something like, we know something like it has, let's say, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. But that's a common answer that everyone basically states. So it's something where we know that, hey, object oriented programming is where we can have classes, we can have objects, and we can uh, basically create many objects of a class in which we can do all these things like inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction. So what they may also look into, what they may also expect is, do you know what object oriented programming is as a programmer? For a programmer, do you know how important this is? So for those who may want to answer this slightly differently, here's the thing: object oriented programming makes program development much easier. Now, how is that? How exactly is that? See, in C language, for everything you need to do separate code. You had functions, you had something like um, structures as well, but structures didn't have functions within them. So with the classes, it is easy to manage size of code and different files when project becomes huge. So as a programmer, this is one thing that we need to know. As programs become huge, or as projects become huge, we can't do everything in a single file. So we'll generally have lots of different classes and objects, lots of different files. So that is where object oriented programming becomes hugely important as well. So this is one of the main reason where you can create many objects of a class and reuse the code of that particular class for many of these objects. So I have one more question. What about encapsulation? Yes, inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction are 3 important parts, along with encapsulation as well. But encapsulation, I'm going to be explaining it in brief, not in detail, but yes, that's also a huge part of it. You can also point it out particularly. There's no issue with it. So encapsulation is basically, as you can think of a capsule, which is a single element consisting of a lot of things. Same way you have a single class consisting of both data, that is variables, as well as functions. So going ahead from this, let us look at, now that we basically know the basics about this, let us just look at what possible questions can be expected within this. So here's the thing. When you talk about object oriented programming, one thing I want to make very clear about, students, please note this very clearly. That is, what makes Java so special compared to C when what makes Java so special compared to C++ when C++ and Java both have object oriented programming? This is a very common question you can expect, but we will look at that once we know a little bit about the basics when it comes down to C++. I have one comment. Yes, C will not support uh, encapsulation and all these things. Yes, that's known. Perfect. So one of the first thing that comes up to C++ is, when it comes to objects, you're going to expect something called a question on constructors and destructors. This is not hugely common. It's not hugely common, I'll repeat first, but it's a question you can expect. That is, what are the types of constructors you have, and what are the types of destructors you have? So once you talk about classes and objects, you can create any amount of objects in a class and everything. They're going to ask you what are types of constructors and destructors. When you're asked what are the types of constructors, know that there's only one type of constructor. There's only one type of destructor. They will particularly ask what are the types of destructors and constructors both, just to confuse you a little, because we know there are multiple types of constructors. That is default, copy, and, as we all know, can you guys think through? Yes, parameterized constructors. Whereas destructor exists only in one type, that is default, without any parameters. So one of you stating, then why didn't I ask about C won't support all of object oriented programming? Directly I had specified C does not support object oriented programming at the start. That basically means C does not support anything related to object oriented programming as well. I hope that's clear. So let's go ahead with it. So when it comes to constructors and destructors, you can basically expect this kind of question. And within this, one common question that has been asked a few times is, what is shallow copy constructor and a deep copy constructor? So to understand this, again, one thing I would suggest right now for everyone who is from a different branch and is new to C++ as well. You guys would need to learn as much as possible in a short time. You guys will need to go through the basics from the basics and learn as much as possible. But in our TCS digital sessions here, we're gonna try to focus only on what could be asked when it comes to interviews particularly. We'll not be going through all the basics. So please note that. But if you guys want to go through everything in basics, you guys can definitely check out any textbook contents or anything, or if you guys want to go through an entire course as well further on, you guys can go through our course by contacting us later on as well. Completely up to you guys. So anyway, going ahead, one of the common questions that is asked here is, what is shallow copy constructor and deep copy constructor? See guys, when we think copy constructor, we think, hey, there's only one copy constructor. But there's something called shallow and deep copy constructor within this. So a shallow copy constructor is the kind of copy constructor which is default. Here's the thing, students. You can create copy constructor in two ways. If you do not create a copy constructor, I'll just point this out. If you don't create your own copy constructor, the default copy constructor is called. If you want to create one, you can create a user defined copy constructor as well. I also want to know one more thing from you guys. Do you all want me to take this with a practical example? That is, do you want me to take the same example in the C++ file next and show you how shallow and deep copy constructors work? Or if you are all able to understand directly with this, that's also fine. Let me know, students, if you want me to take this up over to the next file and show it practically how shallow and deep copy constructor works. We'll do the same. I'll make sure to explain it in that way to you guys. So back to this. I have another question. Yes, this is about the live this is a live video on the interview that's going to happen soon. So okay, you guys want me to go through the same. All right, so think about this, students. Let's say you just have a main function. I'm just trying to take this as quickly as possible, just the difference between shallow and deep copy constructor, because it's a common question that you can expect. So let's say we have a class called A, for instance, and in this class, let me make everything public. That is, let's say we have an integer, let's say z equals 10, and we just have a void fun. Let's not even create a fun. Let's just keep it just one variable. So we'll create an object a1, and we'll create one more object a2. Let's make it 0 initially. Let's say a1 dot a equals 10. Sorry, a1 dot z equals 10. Z is the variable we have here. So we have two objects, a1 and a2. a1's z value is 10. Now, the moment I copy a1 to a2, let's say in this way, every part of a1 is copied to a2. So there's no like limitation. Every part of a1 is copied automatically to a2. So this is called shallow copy constructor. Shallow copy constructor is the default copy constructor. What it does is it copies the object bit by bit to the new object. So here, if you have not created your own constructor, the default copy constructor is going to copy the content of the object a1 bit by bit to a2. So a2 will also have z value as 10 itself, even though it's 0 while creating. Since you're copying a1 to a2, everything of a1 is updated to a2. That's your shallow or default copy constructor, which copies bit by bit automatically. You don't have to assign, you don't have to copy, you don't have to do anything in this. So let's say I just compile it. I'll just move this a little. So yes, one more thing, it's a class is a definition in C++, unlike Java. So semicolon is compulsory. So let's compile this again, run this. So let's just print a2.z. And since we are making sure that we are using cout, I'm just going to also use, as all of you can guess, iostream as well as using namespace standard. So once you execute this, it will have copied 10 already, even though it's supposed to be 0. This is basically your default copy constructor. But if you create your own copy constructor, something like let's say our class name is A. Let's create a constructor where since we are creating our custom constructor, we are supposed to send this object over here. When we send the object over here, we will receive it as a reference variable. We have already learned what are reference variables earlier in our sessions. So once we receive it here, let's say for instance, um, I'll just print something like in user defined copy constructor slash n, for instance. And if we run this, of course there's one semicolon that is missing. All right, so let's compile this, and the moment I try to run this, there's one error that comes up. See, the one error here is it states the moment you try to create object a1, it doesn't have a default constructor. You need to have a default constructor to have a user defined copy constructor. So let's create a default constructor with empty brackets. No need for us to worry about it. So let's just compile it, run it. It says in user defined copy constructor, a1 is copied to a2, but the thing here is you need to know the value of z in a1 is not copied to a2. It's not copied at all. The reason is our custom or our user defined copy constructor, or in other words what we call as deep copy constructor. Deep copy constructor, which is also user defined copy constructor, it does not copy automatically. You need to copy field by field. When I say field by field, what I mean is you need to copy variable by yourself. So that is the major difference between them. So this is a common question that has been asked many times. Shallow copy constructor, to just point out, is your default copy constructor which copies bit by bit. Deep copy constructor is your user defined copy constructor which does not copy bit by bit, and you have to copy the variable by yourself. So I'm supposed to copy the variable of a1 to a2 here. So I'm just going to copy it as, let's say, this arrow mark z is equal to object arrow mark z. Only when I do this statement, it copies. Sorry, it's a reference variable, not a pointer. So since it's a reference variable, I can just use object dot z. So let's just compile this, run this, and now we get 10. So this is the basic idea, guys. Just know the difference between shallow copy constructor and default, or sorry, deep copy constructor. So going ahead from shallow and deep copy constructor, the other questions you can possibly expect again from C++ in this is explain about static keyword in C++. Is there a change in static keyword in different situations? So to this question, I'm just going to point out in short, students, please note this. When it comes to C++, static keywords do, or static variables exist in different ways. In a class, its definition is different. Outside a class, its definition is different. Now how and why? Because static variable just means static variable. How and why can it be different inside and outside a class? Here's the thing. Outside a class, it's default to 0. That's it. You don't have to initialize it. You don't have to initialize it at all. But inside class, there's no default value for a static variable inside a class. You need to make it default to any value outside the class. Only then you can access it. Here's the thought. When you create a static variable inside a class, you have to give it a default value outside the class, not inside, outside the class only. Only then you can access it. Otherwise, you can basically not use it at all. So this is the basic idea when it comes down to this. But let us move on from all these basic questions to the common questions, to the common big questions that you can expect when it comes down to these interviews, that are based on inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction. These are where you can expect more questions, because when you're being hired for the job that they're having you for, and when they start asking you about object oriented programming particularly, I'll repeat, you will expect these questions more than anything else. So make sure you need to know inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction very clearly. So let's just go through one or two of these. What are the kind of questions we can expect, so we can get to know them well and we can get to know them clearly. So guys, we already know when it comes to inheritance, we already basically know that we have four types of inheritance, that is single inheritance, multi-level, hierarchical, and multiple inheritance. Now this is where I'll start giving you guys slight hints of what you can expect as questions between C++ and Java. And I'll repeat again guys, this is where you can expect most common questions, when it comes down to the concepts of object oriented programming, C++ as well as Java. So multiple inheritance is only present in C++. In Java, it is basically unavailable. Now there's a reason for it. They'll ask you particularly, why is multiple inheritance a part of C++ but not a part of Java? So when it was created in C++, there was no thought that, hey, we should not let a person inherit two different classes, or we should not let one class inherit two classes. And we were able to, but when the function names were same in the parent classes, in the child class we would get an error. So to avoid this, in Java, your entire concept of multiple inheritance was removed. In Java, to avoid this error called ambiguity error that happens when multiple inheritance is there, basically entire multiple inheritance was used, but not using classes. Instead it was created using the concept called interfaces. Multiple inheritance was created. So this was the basic idea that we just need to know. So looking at this, here are the questions you can expect. So is there interface and abstract classes in C++? No, there are no interfaces and abstract classes in C++. And when it comes down to this particularly, they will ask you this question pretty much most of the times. That is, how is runtime polymorphism implemented? See guys, what is runtime polymorphism? How do you differentiate between, or this can also be asked as, or how do you differentiate between compile time and run time polymorphism? So this is a very common question guys that has been asked. So let us look at how to basically answer this. So here's the thing, within this, that is particularly runtime and compile time polymorphism, here's what you guys need to know. See, compile time polymorphism is basically when your program is getting compiled, one thing exists in multiple forms. Polymorphism means existing in multiple forms, we know that. So one thing exists in multiple forms during compile time itself. Think of plus. When you do plus with two strings in C++, your output is different. When you do plus with two integers in C++, your output is different. And this definition of plus, which will be different in each case, is already known during compile time. You don't have to wait till runtime. You don't have to wait till runtime. But when it comes to runtime polymorphism, here's the thing that happens. And this is where we need to understand very carefully. So I have a few questions that I've just received. I will answer them immediately after completing this question. I hope that's all right because we're in the middle of a question. So the difference basically here is when asked in interviews, you can explain anything that occurs during compilation itself as multiple forms of a single entity is basically called compile time polymorphism. And example for this, think of this: plus between strings and plus between integers work differently during compile time itself. Now let's go look for what is runtime polymorphism. But before that, I do have a couple of questions. Let me answer them quickly. One question is what about calloc and malloc? Calloc and malloc are functions used to dynamically allocate memory. They have nothing to do with object-oriented programming in this case. But I will be going through DMA later on as well. Not to worry. That we will be looking at in our data structures and algorithm parts of our sessions further on. So I have one more question. In C++ or is it in Java that ambiguity error occurs? In both. It's not like it is limited to C++. Ambiguity error can also occur in Java as well, but under different conditions. The conditions in which it occurs is different in C++ and Java. That's all. But in some certain same conditions, it will occur in both. I'll explain the same thing as well later on. Thanks at Arijit's statement. And I have one more thing. In Java, interfaces was created, not multiple inheritance. Yes, in Java, to avoid ambiguity using, sorry, all right, using classes. Absolutely correct. I missed out a few words over there. Thanks for reminding me of that. Yes, in order to avoid ambiguity error using multiple inheritance of classes, multiple inheritance was created using interfaces. Absolutely correct. So I have one more question that I've received. That is, when it comes to civil department, pretty much same. Whatever department you're from, the questions you can expect are going to be pretty much similar because they're looking to hire, assuming that you already know the basics well because you have cleared the previous rounds. So please note that. So let's now look at what is runtime polymorphism. Runtime polymorphism is where, think of this guys, think of this very clearly because this is something that most of us go wrong in explaining. Not just go wrong in, most of us come up with this definition that is there in the textbook when we try to explain what is runtime polymorphism, and we go wrong in that a lot. So before answering this, if some of you have a doubt regarding this, function overloading is a part of compile time polymorphism. And to one of the questions that has been asked, ambiguity error occurs in C++ or Java. When it is function overloading ambiguity, it occurs in C++ as well as Java. How do you make function overloading ambiguity? I'll tell you guys later on. There is a way to do that. So C++ as well as Java both will encounter those errors. Both will encounter same ambiguity errors in this. Whereas in runtime polymorphism, what you basically have is something called function overriding. Now I'm going to try to explain this in a very different way so that we are all able to understand this clearly and we can answer this within the interviews. So guys, here's the thing. Think about this. When you compile a program, you basically create your .out file in C++ or .class file in Java. So during compilation, So during the compilation, two things do not exist in the same name. Multiple things do not exist in same name during compilation. They only exist during runtime. And here's how it is done. Think of this, guys. There's two classes. Let's assume there's a base class. Sorry, guys. I'll just try to replug my virtual pen device. All right. So let's say there's base class and there is, let's say, derived class. See, in base class, here's the basic idea. Okay, in the base class, let's say you have a function called fun. In derived class also you have a function called fun. So when you compile the program, during compilation itself, base class also has a function called fun, derived class also has a function called fun. So is it existing in two different ways during runtime? Yes. Is it also existing during compile time? Yes. So runtime polymorphism is where something, whatever it could be a function, it could be variable, it could be anything, some entity should not exist in different forms during compile time. That entity should only exist in different forms during run time. This is the basic idea. So also thanks at Simon's question. We are not entirely sure when the interview dates will be there, but we are trying to make sure that we are getting you prepared as much as possible before that. So in this, let's look at this. A runtime polymorphism is basically where something should not exist in multiple forms when the program gets compiled. Now, if I write function fun in base and derived class both, it exists during compile time. To make sure it does not exist during compile time in two forms, that is, during compile time only one function should exist, another function should magically appear during runtime. To do that, we use a keyword called virtual. So here's the thing. Any function that is specified as virtual does not exist to the class during compile time. It only exists, it only gets added, it only gets associated or attached to the class during run time. So this is where during compile time you only have one function that is of derived class, but during run time you have two functions. One is of base class, one is of derived class. Since it is virtual, it gets added during runtime. So this is the advantage of having this. In other words, this is exactly what runtime polymorphism is. So when they ask about this is how you basically should explain it. Runtime polymorphism is where something exists in multiple forms during runtime but not during compile time. It is done by using the keyword virtual in C++. So it is performed by using virtual keyword in C++. And there's lots more to it that you guys want to know. If you want to know, it is always done. It is only performed when a base class object points to derived class. When a base class pointer or object points to derived class, this runtime polymorphism exists. Until then, it basically does not. So going ahead from here, let's look at the next kind of question again that we can often expect. That is, they will ask, in our cases, when it comes to C++, we already know like the questions you can expect in all of these basic things. The other thing that you can expect a question on when it comes to C++ is exception handling. Now, followed by this, we'll focus more on Java as well, because I'll also repeat one more time. Please note this very clearly, students. Followed by this, I forgot to write DSA, data structures and algorithms. So, OOPS, data structures, algorithms, DBMS, networks, and recent trends. You can expect from any of these. So, what we are going through is most important questions in each one of these. So keep tuned into our channel for further days as well. You guys can subscribe so that you guys get notifications as well, which will help you out a lot with these. So we'll be going through more live sessions from tomorrow. We'll be announcing the time in the channel itself. You guys can keep checking it tomorrow by evening once. So what we will be focusing on are going to be these things mainly. So hoping that these will also help you out a lot before your digital interview. So thanks a lot at Vignesh's words. That really means a lot. So going ahead from this, one thing that is often asked in exception handling is, see guys, there are two types of errors that we know. That one is compile time errors, another is runtime errors. Now, when you talk about compile time errors, your program will not even create an output file. If there's an error during compile time, if you miss out something like semicolon here, your program will not even compile. So you can't solve compile time errors during runtime because a running file is not created at all within this. But when you have runtime errors, the moment any program encounters runtime errors, that executing program crashes. You may have seen this a lot even in your Android phones. Like there may be something like app closed unfortunately, uh, try again or force quit or something like that. You may have seen some things like these. All these are because exception handling is not done properly. So basically what happens is, exception handling is where you have certain runtime errors which happen when the program is running, and we will be able to see and sort out how to solve it, or how to make sure that such errors do not exist when the program runs. So do not exist as in how you can overcome it. Think about this. If I have a user, if I have a calculator app, so with a calculator app, if I try to divide something like 10 by 0, for instance, 10 by 10, for instance, it will give us 1. If I divide 10 by 0, for instance, it will crash because you can't do 10 by 0. So when we try to divide by 0, our calculator app should come up with one more statement. It should do one more thing by saying something like, cannot divide by 0, try again. This is the reason why exception handling is there. So if you're asked the question, why do you need exception handling? What does it solve? Remember, it solves runtime errors. We also call this as, in case this question is asked in a different way, compile time errors are also called checked errors because they are checked during compile time. Runtime errors are not checked, so they are also called as unchecked errors. Now, within this, one of the common questions, before I go in depth within this, one of the common questions is array index out of bound exceptions. So before going with this, I have a couple of questions which I'll answer. That is there any problem if I select C language instead of Python, even though I'm a CS student? No, not necessarily. See, uh, your language preference, whatever you like, is up to you. There's literally um, no like compulsion that just because you're from CS student you have to select only this. And thanks a lot at Soman's feedback as well. That's really nice to hear. So one of the common thing that you can expect is, think about this. You have an array of 5 elements, and the problem in C and C++ is there's no array boundary checking. There's literally no array boundary checking at all. But in Java, you do have boundary checking. So if you go out of boundary, I'll just point this out. If you go out of, let's say, array boundary in C or C++, you won't have any penalty. You won't get any error. There is no error that you may expect. But in Java, if you do this, program crashes. So All of these, when you start to work through them, you need to be able to figure out how to solve these runtime errors. That is where runtime or exception handling for runtime comes into picture. So one thing you guys need to know, array boundary checking is not there in C as well as C++. It's only there in Java. So these are solved by exception handling, but there's a difference in exception handling within C++ and Java, because both C++ and Java work differently. So their keywords are different. So the exception handling that comes up in C++ is different, and the same thing that comes up in Java is also different. So in C++, you have three keywords. There is try, catch, and throw. Whereas in Java, you have five keywords. That is try, catch, throw, throws, and finally. So these are something you just need to know. You can't say like exception handling is there in C++ and Java and both are same. So you basically can't just do that. So remember that the keywords in C++ or try catch and finally try catch and throw. In C Java you have a few other things. So when asked questions on these, please make sure you guys know how much to work through, how much to answer. So I have one more question before I go ahead. Unfortunately, I kept C and Python in my resume, but I don't know Python. But I'm good at C and oops. Can I update my resume during my interview? I would suggest never to do that. You're basically stating that I lied in my previous resume. Please consider that I did not lie during my interview. Never do that. You may have it in a couple of days. Just go through some basics of Python at least and say that you just started learning Python. At least say that. At least say that you just started learning Python. You only know the very basic concepts of it. You're not too good at it. That is, you don't know advanced things like libraries for machine learning or anything like that. Just say that you only know basics. That is good enough, according to me, at least. If you say that you only know basics, that'll at least help out. So these, as I will repeat, are some of the common interview questions that you can expect, particularly when it comes down to C++. Now that we know these basic things, let us go on to the basic questions that I feel you guys can expect from previous year questions and so on when it comes to Java. So one of the first questions you will expect is, what is the current version of Java? What do you guys think? Any answers? You guys can let me know. Okay, we have got a few responses. All right, so here's the basic idea, students. So the current version of Java that you have as of now is not Java 8, it is Java 15. And 16 is currently in what is the pre-build phase. So at Sanjay's question, not entirely sure, could be very soon. That's why we are trying to make sure we are going through as many sessions as possible for you guys. So the idea here, guys, when it comes down to Java questions, let's go through this. What could be asked basically? See, guys, when you begin with Java, they will first ask you what are the different editions of Java. What do you know about Java? What are the different editions that you have in Java? You have Java Standard Edition, Java Enterprise Edition, Java Micro Edition. It's not called Mobile Edition, it's called Micro Edition. These are the three versions of Java. So Java Standard Edition is the basic core Java that you have. Java Enterprise Edition is the part that you have which particularly has all your Spring, Hibernate, and so on. And Java Micro Edition is where you have all the mobile app development packages included within them. So following by this, The basic thing we need to know. Okay, the basic thing we need to know within this is, from Java, what questions can I possibly expect? What basic questions can I begin to expect? So the first question is, what is the difference between C++ and Java? What exactly is the difference? So one of the first question that comes up here is like this. So we know C++ is also object oriented, Java is also object oriented. So where's the difference? Where are we like having a difference here? It's sort of difficult to answer compared to C and C++. But here's the thing. C++ is mainly used for system programming, whereas Java is mainly used for application programming. That is, for instance, you guys know Linux is built on C++. So it's a whole operating system that was built on top of C++ itself. Whereas on top of Java, we build applications more, not operating systems. We don't build system programming. We perform direct application creations. So this is one of the most important part, because you will see a lot of web apps on Java. You see a lot of apps that are developed on Android on top of Java, and so on. So going ahead from this, the next thing you guys would generally answer is, most things we do is, what are the differences? We just start stating features or buzzwords of Java. So will that help out? Will that be enough? Like just features or buzzwords of Java? If you just say a feature of Java is platform independent. Java is it platform independent, but C++ is not platform independent. If you state this and if you don't know what exactly it is, you're in a pickle. You may not be able to hold your way out to answer this. So I have one question by Sri Charan. Let's think through and plan out. So there is platform independent, but C++ isn't. How are you going to explain when they ask, like, what does this mean? Here's the basic idea, guys. When I compile a C++ program in Windows, whether it is C or C++, when you compile it in Windows, you get a .exe file. When you compile a C++ program in, let's say, Linux, you get something like a .out file. The extensions are different. Extensions are different in both. When you compile a Java program, however, whether you compile in Windows or Linux, it does not matter. It doesn't matter at all. The output file you're getting is always same. There is .class file. It's always constant and same. There's absolutely no difference in it. So that's the basic idea you guys need to know. So when you compile a C++ program, the compiled file can only be executed in its own platform. When you compile in a Java program, a compiled program in Windows can be executed in Linux also, compiled program in Linux can be executed in Windows also, or anything like that. That is basically the idea of why it is called platform independent. Now there are some things which Java does not have, and when you start to get a question like, okay, you know now that you now know Java, C and C++, so what's the difference between C++ and Java, C and Java? There are some things you can directly say. There is some things that do not that are not present in Java. That is, Java doesn't have the following things. The first thing Java does not have is pointers. See, when you say Java doesn't have pointers, Java doesn't have pointers that you can use. Internally, they exist. Java still has pointers internally that can be used within Java programs by itself, which you can't use in any way whatsoever. Java doesn't have go to and label statements. Java doesn't have multiple inheritance. Java doesn't have operator overloading with objects. Operator overloading with objects is only present in C++. It's not there in Java. Also, Java doesn't have many other things like reference variables. If there is no reference variables, call by reference does not exist. Also, call by address does not exist because you don't have access to pointers. So there is only call by value that exists in Java. That's the basic idea you guys need to know. So these are some things that you guys just need to know. Also, you had virtual keyword in C++. You don't have that also in Java. So these are a few things that you just need to know when you get asked like what does Java have, or what does Java does not have, or what's the difference when it comes down to C and Java, or C++ and Java. So with this clear, let us look at some basic interview questions and that you'll expect when it comes down to Java. Here's the thing, guys. Some basic things. I'm not going to go in depth within these. I'll repeat. I'll not go in depth within this. I'll just go for a line within them and try to go through the next topic as quickly as possible between us. So please observe this, guys. Here, you have something called JRE, sorry, JDK, JRE, JVM, and JIT. So JIT is the compiler that is called just in time compiler, which decides whether to compile or to interpret based on the optimization. Then you have JVM, and one more thing you guys need to know is Java is very secure. Why do we call Java as secure? Is because it has something called Java virtual machine. So if you ever get an interview question like, okay, you know C, C++, and Java, which is more secure and why? So basically, Java is more secure because one, you can't use pointers to access any address. You don't have array index out of bound access. Also, you have something called Java virtual machine, which executes a program in a sandbox mode. What this means is every program that you're executing, you guys may have seen on beaches there are boxes of sand in which kids are playing who can't get out of it. Basically, just like that, there's a box of sand in which a Java program runs and it can't get out of it to access outside data. So that is basically called sandbox mode. So Java virtual machine exists and runs in a sandbox mode out of which it can't go out. So it can't access any other program, any other data, and so on. That's the basic idea. So this Java virtual machine and JIT and everything, plus some, I'll make this as JRE, I'll make this as JDK. So Java virtual machine and some libraries that are needed to execute as in to run the programs are stored, basically stored together, and they are called as Java runtime environment. And this JRE plus some libraries to create and compile programs are basically called Java development kit. So if you want to create a program, you need to make sure you're creating the programs using JDK. If you just want to execute them, you can execute them using JRE. That's the basic idea. Now that we know the very basic concept, now that we know the very basic idea when it comes down to Java, let us directly go on to object oriented programming within Java, and let's see what questions we can expect within this, because there are a lot that you can expect. So before we go into OOPS particularly, there are two questions that are very, very common. That is static variable and final variable. Here's the thing, guys. Static variable can be used in Java for a class, for an object, and for a variable. Similarly, final can be used for a class, an object, and a variable. So one thing you can expect if you say I know Java is what is static in Java? What exactly is static in Java, or what exactly is final in Java? Here's the thing, guys. Static can exist as a class, object, variable, and one more thing that is called a block. So let's look at what exactly they are. A class which is static. Again, any class cannot be static. First thing we need to know, please note and remember this very clearly. Any class cannot be static. Only inner classes can be static. A class that can be static, make sure that you can access anything within that class directly. Only inner classes can be static. So you don't need outer class object separately to create inner class object. So the idea here is just any class can't be static, only inner classes. And a static object is deleted only at end of program. So the thing is, whenever you create anything, let's say int a, this variable a is deleted the moment the scope ends in which it is created. So we know scope, the moment the scope ends, whatever is created within the set of scopes are deleted. But a static object is not deleted at the end of its scope. A static object is deleted at the end of the program directly, just like a static variable. So followed by this, the next thing is a static block. A static block is just a static keyword and a set of brackets in which you can write any statements. You can write any number of statements here. A static block always executes before first statement of main. This is something we need to know. And finally, a static variable, just like a static block, is deleted only at end of the program. These are the basic differences that are there. Similarly, there is something called final class, final object, and final variable. See guys, one more thing you need to know in Java, it also does not have const keyword. We had const keyword in C and C++. In Java, the const keyword is replaced by final. So when a class is final, the meaning is different. When an object is final, the meaning is different. And when a variable is final, again the meaning is different. So when a class is final, here's the idea. That class cannot be inherited. So let's say you have a class base, and in Java, let's say in Java, you make this class base as final class base. And this, let's say class base is, you're trying to inherit it with something like class derived extends base. If you try to inherit this, you're going to get an error because you can't inherit a final class. That's the first idea. Now the second idea is, let's say it's not final, you have a function called fun. I'm not going in detail and writing everything about it because this is not a coding interview, this is more of a face-to-face interview. So I want to make sure you guys know as much as required so that you guys can easily answer to this. So here's the idea, guys. A class base and class derived can have function with same name, but if the base class has it as final, you can't create it in the derived class. That's the basic idea. Any class which is any function which is final in base class cannot be inherited. This is also one thing we should know. So here you get error stating, so any not object, sorry guys, function, not object, class, function and variable. So any function that is, let's say, um, final cannot be overridden by its derived class. That means if you have a final function in a class, you can't create a function with the same name in derived class at all. You basically cannot do that. So then you have a final variable, which means it's a constant. And finally, you also have, in this case, something similar to this. You guys can create the same. There is final class, final function, final variable. Now, going ahead with this, these are some basic questions you may expect. These are some topics you may expect questions on before we go on to the crux or the major part of object oriented programming. In object oriented programming, we know and we remember that in C++, we learned something called constructors and destructors. In Java, you have specific type of constructors, but there is no destructors as well. I'll also state here, in all the things, Java does not have destructors. So if you get a question like explain about destructors in Java, know that it's a trick question. It's not a straight up question that you think like, hey, I know C++, I know how destructors work, so I'm just going to say destructor is a function which makes sure that it executes when an object is being deleted. Don't say that when asked in Java. Just say that destructors do not exist in Java, and they're replaced by something called garbage collector in Java, which automatically takes care of removing all the variables, removing all the values as much as possible. So going ahead with this, guys, I have one more question asking, please discuss about Python too. We will see. We will see and try, because our main focus is on you guys clearing this by making sure we focus on these first. I have one more question. Please discuss about Java one more. As in, you want us to take one more session only focusing on Java, because there are still more things in Java. We'll make sure to cover as much as required. Not to worry. So I have one more question stating when will be the interview. See, when it came to digital previous round, they announced just a couple of days or 3 days before the interview on a short notice. So this we are not entirely sure about. So it could be at any time after these holidays. We don't know. So that is the reason we are trying to make sure that we provide these sessions to you right away as much as possible from Quant Masters, that you guys can learn from and use for your own benefit. So going ahead from this, let's go on to a few us for now that are basically asked in this as well. So I have one more question regarding file flush, which we'll focus on later on once we go to files. So the next common thing that you're often expected when you come up to these concepts is, once these basic things are done, there is one more thing called super keyword. Super keyword is also newly available in Java. It's not there in C++. And remember, guys, before this, one thing, this keyword, particularly the keyword this, was a pointer in C++, but this is a keyword in Java. So they do the same work, they do the same task. The job done by both are same, but remember, C++ is where this is a keyword, and Java is where this, C++ is where this is a pointer, and Java is where this keyword is not a pointer, because you basically don't have pointers in Java. It's just a keyword, but both do the same work. And super keyword is used, one thing we need to know, within a subclass to access superclass data. So you can access constructor using just super. This will access constructor. You can access super dot variable name. This will access a variable of superclass. You can also access super dot function name, which will access a function of superclass. You within all to be done within subclass. This is the basic idea. Now, going ahead from this, one of the common questions that again come up apart from this is access specifiers. See, in C++, we know there are only three access specifiers, that is private, protected, and public. When it is private, we know that it is default. Default is private, that is everything that is declared as private is accessible only within the class scope. Outside the class scope, you can't access it. Protected is where it is accessible within the class and outside the class only in its derived class, nowhere else. So public is where we know we can access it within class, within subclass, with objects of classes and subclasses. This is what we know when it comes down to C++. But when it comes down to Java, basically what you have is entirely different sort of things. In Java, you have one more, I'll repeat, you have one more access specifier, or we call it as access modifier, that is default. So here's how it is. You have private, you have default, then you have protected, then you have public. I'm writing it in the order of protection. Private is highest protection, default is next highest protection, protected is third highest, and default is the lowest level of protection. So private, basically the definition is same, that is accessible only within a class scope. Default is where it is accessible only within the package scope. That means you can't access it outside the package at all. And if you want to access within the package scope, it can be accessed in class, in subclass, using objects as well. Protected is one level above this. I'll repeat, students. Protected goes a level ahead compared to default. Here's basically what it does. Protected is where it is accessible within package and outside package as well. See, default is where you can't access outside the package whatsoever. Protected is where you can access even outside the package, but the condition is in class or in subclass only. So that's why we feel protected is weaker and default is stronger, because default makes sure that you can't access outside the package. Protected makes sure that you can access outside the package, although without the objects. Whereas public, as we know, within as well as outside packages, and the condition here is in class, in subclass, with objects as well. This is the basic idea. So students, please wait for just a couple of minutes. Please be on screen with this for a couple of minutes. I'll just look at the questions if you guys have any. Before I go for the next topic, I will take those questions. So please await for just 2 to 3 minutes. I'll wait for any questions before moving on to the next topic. So I do have a couple of questions. Let me just go through them as quickly as possible right now. So one of the questions I have received is, what is the difference between using compiler and interpreter in Java? This is a really nice question. Let me try answering this as quickly as possible. Here's the thing, guys. See, compiler is called Java C. It compiles your .java file to a .class file, which is called a bytecode. Whereas in your Java, you have what we call as platform dependent. It's platform dependent, not platform independent, because it's a part of JVM. See, one thing you guys need to know: Java is platform independent, but JVM is platform dependent. So what happens here is, each operating system's memory management is different. So its virtual memory or virtual manager software should also be different based on different platforms. So in here, the basic idea is, you have an interpreter which converts your bytecode, that is .class file, into platform dependent machine code to execute. This is done using interpreter. So this is why we say Java uses compiler as well as interpreter both. So I have one more question. Does OOPS concept required in machine learning? Machine learning, there is a part of OOPS is there in machine learning, but it's not so huge. We will discuss more about that in coming sessions. So new versus malloc and everything, yes, we'll also discuss that in the coming sessions as well. So before we give you some more important information regarding this session, before I give you guys a few more important information regarding this whole um, session that we are conducting here today, tomorrow, and so on, I'm just going to share this content with you for your reference with today's date, and I'll share the link over to you guys. So please wait for just 1 minute as I share this link over to you. And by the time, there's a bit of important information that we want to share. So please do make sure to pay attention to this, guys. I'll be handing over to our colleague Himanshu, who will be giving you guys some pretty important information regarding this. Alright, guys, so the first important information is that our next session will be 5 to 7 tomorrow evening. So you guys can catch up for that session. That will be from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. again tomorrow. And for the link, I have just shared the same within the screen. You guys can use the same link and access the data for today's session entirely. So make sure you guys go through that link so that you guys can get all the data of today's class and the previous class as well. And tomorrow at 5 p.m., our next live session on TCS Digital will continue. So make sure you guys stick in and do like and subscribe our videos, go through it more. And you guys can also let me know how did you guys get to know about our sessions? One question only to you guys. You guys can put it in your live chat. Whether you guys got to know our session through um, some YouTube recommendations or friend recommendations or whatever way it was. You guys can just put it on chat, which will help us out as well to understand how you guys are getting to know about this. Thank you, guys. Also, guys, one more final thing apart from this, that is an important part. Before going on to our next session, because our next session will be purely based on more advanced concepts in Java, as well as some concepts particularly in data structures and algorithms, and we'll try to go through DBMS combinations. We'll try to switch between these two before going for recent trends and everything. So I wanted to ask you guys another question finally before I go for questions from you guys. What is your feedback on today's sessions? Can you guys let me know if you guys felt this was good enough, this is the right speed, it's nice, or whatever you guys felt about this session over the last 2 hours. Some of you may have gone through our last 4 hours of TCS Digital. Some of you may have just gone through the last two. So let me know, guys, how did you find this session? Was it something like you feel yes, it's definitely worth the time spent, and you guys feel like yes, I would love to be a part of these more and more, or whatever you guys felt? Do let me know by comments, guys. That'll be hugely beneficial. And